I called my wife at 1 a.m. while I was on a work trip. My best friend answered. He said calmly, "She's busy right now. She'll call you later." Then I heard her laugh in the background. I took a deep breath and said, "Keep her. She's your problem now." The silence on the other end was beautiful. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was some kind of relationship genius who saw all the warning signs and chose to ignore them like terms and conditions on an app download. No, I was legitimately clueless. The kind of clueless that makes you wonder if ignorance really is bliss or just expensive stupidity with a good marketing team. My name is Eli Porter. I'm 35 years old, and up until about 3 weeks ago, I genuinely believed I had my life figured out. Spoiler alert, I didn't. My daily routine was so predictable you could set your atomic clock to it. Wake up at 6:30, stumble to the kitchen like a zombie extra in a low-budget horror film, brew the strongest coffee known to mankind, the kind that makes your heart question its life choices, and then sit at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone while Spotify played some smooth jazz that made me feel like I had my act together. I didn't, but the saxophone really sold the illusion. I worked as a logistics manager at a mid-sized distribution company, which is a fancy way of saying I spent 40 hours a week making sure boxes got from point A to point B without the universe imploding. Riveting stuff. The kind of career that makes people's eyes glaze over at parties when you try to explain what you do for a living. My wife, Hannah, was supposedly living her best life working in PR. And when I say PR, I mean she posted carefully filtered photos of avocado toast at overpriced brunch spots and called it networking. Her Instagram bio literally said, "Building brands, one latte at a time," which should have been my first red flag. But again, I was operating on the intelligence level of a golden retriever who thinks every stranger is a potential best friend. She had this whole aesthetic going on. Perfectly styled hair, outfits that probably cost more than my car payment, and this weird obsession with using words like synergy and authentic connection in casual conversation. I thought it was just her job bleeding into real life. Turns out, a lot of things were bleeding into our life that I didn't know about. We lived in this cozy little house in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Well, technically the bank owned most of it, but we got to pretend we were responsible adults with equity and everything. We had two cats, Mr. Whiskers and Colonel Fuzz, who were about as useful as decorative pillows, but significantly more judgmental. Those furry freeloaders spent their days sleeping in sunbeams and knocking things off counters just to watch me suffer. I love them anyway because apparently, I'm a glutton for being emotionally manipulated by creatures who can't even open their own food cans. Then there was Dylan. Oh, Dylan. My best friend since college. The guy who knew my Taco Bell order by heart. The dude who had a key to our house and used it so frequently that our mail carrier probably thought we were running some kind of progressive polyamorous household. Dylan was that friend who showed up uninvited, raided your fridge, fixed your Wi-Fi when it inevitably crapped out, and made himself so comfortable on your couch that you started wondering if he paid rent somewhere else or just rotated between friends' houses like some kind of freeloading nomad. He was funny, helpful, always around when you needed him, and apparently, always around when you didn't need him too, but we'll get to that particular dumpster fire later. I thought everything was fine. Actually, I thought everything was better than fine. I thought I'd somehow cracked the code to adult life. Stable job that paid the bills, wife who smiled at me over morning coffee, best friend who made me laugh, and two cats who occasionally acknowledged my existence when their food bowls were empty. What more could a guy want, right? Maybe I should have wanted my wife to actually be in love with me and not treat our marriage like a convenient living arrangement with tax benefits. But hey, hindsight is 20/20, and apparently, my eyesight was legally blind. Hannah would come home from her networking events smelling like expensive perfume I definitely didn't buy her, talking about her amazing connections and how busy she was building her personal brand. I'd nod along like a supportive husband, heat up leftovers, and ask about her day. She'd give me these vague answers about meetings and clients and strategy sessions, and I'd just accept it all because I was operating under the dangerous assumption that my wife wasn't a lying, cheating, selfish tornado of betrayal wrapped in designer athleisure wear. Dylan would come over for game night about 3 times a week. We'd sit in the living room, controllers in hand, talking trash while Hannah supposedly worked late or attended another one of her mysterious book club meetings. And here's the thing that really gets me. She hasn't finished reading an actual book since 2014. I'm talking about a woman who bought a Kindle, used it twice to read celebrity gossip blogs, and then turned it into a glorified coaster. But suddenly she's in a book club that meets every Thursday evening and sometimes Saturdays too. The math wasn't mathing, but I was too busy being a trusting idiot to pull out a calculator. Looking back now with the crystal clear vision of someone who's been metaphorically punched in the face by reality, I can see all the signs I missed. The way Hannah's laugh sounded different around Dylan. Lighter, more genuine, like she was actually enjoying herself instead of tolerating my presence. The inside jokes that I wasn't inside of. The way she'd volunteered Dylan to help with random household projects that I was perfectly capable of handling myself. Oh, Eli, you're so busy with work. Let's just ask Dylan to fix the leaky faucet. Yeah, turns out he was fixing more than the plumbing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I paid the bills on time, kept the fridge stocked, took out the trash without being asked, and genuinely tried to be a decent husband. I thought that's what you did in a marriage. You showed up, you tried, you built a life together. Domestic perfection, or at least that's what I kept telling myself every time I ignored that weird feeling in my gut that something was off. That feeling that most people call intuition, but I called paranoia and shoved down with denial and rationalization. But here's the beautiful thing about being spectacularly wrong about your entire life. Eventually, the truth doesn't just knock politely on your door, it kicks that door down, sets your couch on fire, and leaves you standing in the wreckage wondering how you missed all the smoke alarms going off for months. Chicago in October is about as pleasant as a wet sock, cold, gray, and vaguely depressing in a way that makes you question your life choices. I was there for a logistics conference, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds. Picture a hotel ballroom filled with middle-aged men in wrinkled business casual attire, discussing supply chain optimization over stale coffee and sad croissants that had the texture of cardboard. I'd sat through 8 hours of PowerPoint presentations that could have been emails, shaken hands with people whose names I immediately forgot, and collected enough branded pens to supply a small school district. This was my life. This was what I'd worked toward. Living the dream, baby. The hotel they'd stuck me in was one of those generic business establishments that all look exactly the same. Beige walls, abstract art that looked like someone sneezed paint onto a canvas, and a lobby that smelled like industrial cleaning solution mixed with broken dreams. My room was on the 14th floor, overlooking a parking lot because apparently, the universe has a sense of humor and it's not a good one. The bed was decent though, I'll give them that. Those crisp white sheets that make you feel fancy even though you're just a regular dude from the suburbs who still gets excited about free continental breakfast. It was around 12:30 when I finally peeled myself off the uncomfortable conference room chair and made it back to my room. I was that particular brand of exhausted where your body is tired but your brain won't shut up, replaying every awkward small talk conversation and reminding you of that one thing you said that probably sounded way cooler in your head. I'd texted Hannah earlier in the evening, just a simple "conference was boring, miss you" kind of message. She'd responded with a thumbs up emoji. A thumbs up, not "miss you too," or "can't wait for you to come home," or even "sorry your day sucked." Just a thumbs up, like I was a coworker who'd sent her a meeting reminder. I should have known something was wrong right then. But instead, I told myself she was probably busy with work stuff, maybe dealing with a demanding client or putting out some PR fire. That's what I did best. Made excuses, filled in the gaps with optimistic narratives that made me feel better about the growing distance between us. Gold medal mental gymnastics, folks. I could have competed professionally. I took a shower that lasted way too long because the water pressure was surprisingly excellent and hotel showers always feel like a vacation from your regular shower, even though you're literally just washing yourself in a different geographical location. I put on the complimentary bathrobe because when you're paying $200 a night, you're damn well going to use every amenity they give you, and scrolled through my phone for a bit. Instagram was full of Hannah's latest post, a photo of her coffee cup next to her laptop with some caption about grinding and building empires. 43 likes already. I added mine because that's what supportive husbands do, even when they're alone in a depressing hotel room wondering why their wife can't text more than an emoji. At around 1 in the morning, I was lying in bed watching some late-night talk show that wasn't funny enough to keep me awake, but wasn't boring enough to put me to sleep. You know that limbo state where you're just existing in a half-conscious fog. That's where I was living. And suddenly, I got hit with this wave of homesickness that felt ridiculous for a 35-year-old man. I missed my own bed. I missed the cats walking across my face at 3 in the morning demanding food. Hell, I even missed Hannah's cold feet touching my legs in the middle of the night, which I usually complained about, but would have welcomed right then. So I did what any devoted, slightly pathetic husband would do. I called her. Just to hear her voice, say goodnight. Maybe have an actual conversation that didn't involve emojis or three-word responses. The phone rang once, and I smiled to myself thinking she'd probably answer all groggy and adorable, tell me she was half asleep and missed me. The phone rang twice, and I was already planning what I'd say, something sweet but not too sappy because I had a reputation to maintain, even with my own wife. Then someone answered, but it wasn't Hannah. Hey man, she's busy right now, she'll call you later. Dylan's voice hit me like a freight train loaded with red flags and audacity. My brain literally short-circuited trying to process what I was hearing. Dylan, my best friend Dylan, answering my wife's phone. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the same Dylan who had his own apartment across town, his own life, his own phone. What possible reason could he have for answering Hannah's phone at 1 in the morning unless... No, wait, there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she'd left her phone at his place earlier? Maybe they were all hanging out as a group and he grabbed it by accident? Maybe I was having a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too many sad conference croissants? Dylan, I managed to choke out, my voice sounding weird and distant like it was coming from someone else's body. My heart was doing this thing where it felt like it was trying to escape through my ribcage. Fight or flight response. Except I was lying in a hotel bed 14 floors up with nowhere to run and nothing to fight except the growing realization that I was an absolute moron. And then I heard it. That laugh. Hannah's laugh, unmistakable and crystal clear in the background. Not just any laugh either. It was that genuine, carefree, actually amused laugh that I used to hear back when we first started dating. The laugh she made when I tried to cook and inevitably set off the smoke alarm. The laugh that I hadn't heard directed at anything I'd said or done in at least a year, maybe longer. That laugh was happening in Dylan's presence at 1 in the morning while I was alone in Chicago thinking about how much I missed her. The pieces fell into place with the subtle grace of a piano being dropped from a skyscraper. The late nights. The book club. The inside jokes. Dylan's constant presence in our house. Hannah's new perfume. The way she'd been distant but claimed she was just stressed about work. The thumbs-up emoji. All of it, every single thing I'd rationalized and explained away, suddenly made perfect, horrible, crystal-clear sense. I could have screamed. I could have cried. I could have thrown my phone across the room and watched it shatter against that ugly abstract art. I could have stayed on the line demanding explanations, begging for it not to be what it obviously was, making a complete fool of myself. But instead, something weird happened. I got really, really calm. Like supernaturally calm. The kind of calm that probably worried the part of my brain responsible for normal human emotional responses. I took a deep breath, stared at the popcorn ceiling of my generic hotel room, and said the only thing that felt right. Keep her, bro. She's your problem now. Then I hung up. The silence that followed was absolutely gorgeous. No crying, no panicking, no dramatic outbursts. Just me, lying in a hotel bed, staring at the ceiling like I was the star of a sad insurance commercial about life's unexpected plot twists. My phone started ringing immediately. Dylan's name flashed on the screen. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail, then turned it off completely. And you know what? I slept like a baby. Best sleep I'd had in months. I woke up the next morning expecting to feel like someone had ripped my chest open and replaced my heart with a garbage disposal full of broken glass and regret. You know, the standard post-betrayal emotional package deal that comes with discovering your wife is auditioning for a reality show called Keeping Up with the Homewreckers. But instead, I felt fine. Actually, better than fine. I felt like I'd just had the best night's sleep in recent memory, which was deeply concerning because according to every romantic comedy and therapy podcast I'd ever accidentally consumed, I should have been a sobbing mess ordering room service ice cream at 4 in the morning while listening to Adele on repeat. The morning sunlight was streaming through those awful hotel curtains that never quite close all the way, and I just laid there for a minute taking inventory of my emotional state like a mechanic checking under the hood. Sadness? Nope. Anger? A little, but it was more of a background simmer than a full boil. Soul-crushing despair? Surprisingly absent. What I felt most was relieved and hungry. Mostly hungry, if I'm being honest. I checked my phone, still off from last night. 37 missed calls. 14 from Dylan, 23 from Hannah, and apparently my mother had called too, which meant someone had already started the drama chain reaction. I turned the phone back off. Whatever nuclear fallout was happening back home could wait until after I'd caffeinated and consumed an irresponsible amount of carbohydrates. The hotel breakfast buffet was calling my name like a siren song, except instead of luring sailors to their doom, it was luring a recently cuckolded logistics manager to processed meats and questionable scrambled eggs. I got dressed in yesterday's conference outfit because I'd packed like an optimistic idiot who thought he'd be returning home to a loving wife instead of a Greek tragedy written by someone with a sick sense of humor. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked surprisingly normal. No visible signs of heartbreak, no scarlet letter branded on my forehead. Just a regular dude who needed to shave and maybe invest in better under-eye cream. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt weirdly significant, like I was descending into my new life as a single man, or at least a man whose marriage had the structural integrity of a house of cards in a wind tunnel. There was an elderly couple in the elevator with me, holding hands and smiling at each other with that comfortable affection that comes from decades of not betraying each other with mutual friends. I wanted to tell them congratulations on clearing that apparently very difficult bar, but instead I just nodded politely and stared at the floor numbers lighting up. The breakfast area was packed with conference attendees, all of them looking various degrees of hungover and professionally miserable. I recognized a few faces from yesterday's riveting presentation on optimizing warehouse efficiency through AI integration, but didn't feel like making small talk. I was a man on a mission, and that mission was eating my feelings in socially acceptable public setting. I loaded up my plate like I was preparing for the apocalypse. Scrambled eggs, bacon, extra bacon, because if your wife is cheating on you with your best friend, you deserve all the bacon, sausage links, hash browns, a waffle that I drowned in syrup, and a cinnamon roll the size of my head. Zero shame, maximum carbs. The breakfast attendant, a sweet older lady named Patricia according to her name tag, raised her eyebrows at my plate. Rough night, honey? She asked with the kind of knowing sympathy that suggested she'd seen her fair share of sad business travelers. You could say that, I replied, grabbing a cup of coffee that could probably strip paint. But this breakfast is making it significantly better. That's the spirit, Patricia said, patting my shoulder like she was my honorary grandmother. Whatever's bothering you, bacon makes everything better. I wanted to tell her that bacon, while delicious, could not fix adultery, but she seemed so confident in the healing properties of processed pork products that I didn't want to ruin her worldview. So I just smiled, thanked her, and found a table in the corner where I could eat in peace and contemplate the smoking ruins of my marriage. The bacon was actually pretty decent for hotel food. Crispy, not too greasy, cooked by someone who understood that limp bacon is an affront to breakfast everywhere. I ate methodically, like each bite was helping me process what had happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I turned it back on because avoiding reality only works for so long, and I was an adult who had to face consequences eventually, even if those consequences were my wife's panicked text messages. Sorry, phone died LOL. That was it. That was her opening move in what should have been the most important conversation of our marriage. Not, I can explain. Not, we need to talk. Not even a, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Just sorry, phone died LOL. With a lowercase LOL like this was some minor inconvenience instead of a relationship-ending betrayal. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. I stared at that message for a solid minute, watching the three dots appear and disappear as she typed, and deleted, probably trying to figure out how to spin this situation into something that didn't make her look like the villain in her own romantic disaster movie. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and about 17 different responses ran through my head, ranging from angry paragraphs to single emoji reactions that would convey my disappointment without giving her the satisfaction of knowing she'd hurt me. But then something clicked. Some part of my brain that had apparently been waiting for permission to stop being a pushover finally woke up and said, "You know what? We're going to have fun with this." So I typed back, "No worries. Hope the funeral for your phone went well." Short, simple, sarcastic enough to let her know that I knew, but not desperate enough to give her ammunition. I hit send and immediately felt better, like I'd just won the first round of a game I didn't know I was playing. Her response came back almost immediately. "What? Then, Eli, can we talk?" Then, "I know you're upset, but let me explain." Then, "It's not what you think." The messages kept coming, each one more desperate than the last, and I just sat there eating my bacon and watching her digital panic with the detached interest of someone observing a train wreck from a safe distance. My coffee was getting cold, but the Schadenfreude was piping hot and freshly brewed. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to show up at home demanding explanations or fighting for a marriage that she'd already set on fire and roasted marshmallows over. Nope. I was going to be strategic about this. Cold, calculated, and absolutely petty in the most satisfying way possible. I finished my breakfast, every last bite, including a second cinnamon roll because emotional trauma apparently gave me the appetite of a teenage athlete, and headed back to my room with a weird sense of purpose. This wasn't going to be one of those messy divorces where people threw plates and screamed in lawyers' offices. This was going to be a masterclass in controlled demolition. If Hannah wanted excitement and betrayal and drama, she was about to get more than she bargained for. I pulled out my laptop, opened a fresh document, and titled it Operation Scorched Earth. Then I reconsidered and changed it to Strategic Life Reorganization, because even in my spite, I was still a logistics manager who appreciated professional terminology. Time to turn this heartbreak into a strategy meeting with snacks. I returned home from Chicago on a Thursday afternoon, which felt appropriately anticlimactic for someone whose entire life had just been revealed as an elaborate joke at his expense. The flight back was uneventful except for the middle-aged guy next to me who insisted on telling me about his timeshare in Scottsdale for 45 minutes straight. Normally, I would have been annoyed, but honestly, listening to Brad, or was it Chad, ramble about golf courses and resort amenities was significantly better than thinking about my dumpster fire of a marriage. Sometimes the universe gives you small mercies in the form of boring strangers with terrible investment advice. Hannah was at work when I got home, which was perfect because it gave me time to do what any rational person would do in my situation, turn into a discount detective with a vendetta and a lot of free time. I'm talking full investigative mode, the kind of behavior that would probably concern my therapist if I had one, which I definitely needed to get after this whole ordeal was over. But first, evidence. I needed cold, hard, undeniable proof that I wasn't losing my mind, that the midnight phone call wasn't some weird fever dream induced by bad conference food. I dropped my suitcase in the bedroom and immediately started looking around our house with fresh eyes. The eyes of someone who'd been played for a fool and was determined to figure out exactly how long the circus had been in town. The cats greeted me with their usual indifference, rubbing against my legs only because they probably assumed I'd come home with food. Mr. Whiskers jumped on the counter, knocking over a coffee mug that thankfully was empty. Colonel Fuzz just stared at me from the couch with those judgmental yellow eyes that seemed to say, "We knew the whole time, idiot." Yeah, rub it in," I muttered to the cat, who yawned in response. I started in the obvious place, Hannah's home office, which was really just a corner of our second bedroom that she'd claimed with a desk from IKEA and a corkboard covered in motivational quotes about boss babes and crushing goals. The desk was surprisingly organized for someone whose life was a chaotic mess of lies and betrayal. I felt a little guilty going through her stuff, but then I remembered Dylan answering her phone at 1 in the morning, and the guilt evaporated faster than my trust in humanity. Her planner was sitting right there, pink and leather-bound with gold edges, the kind of overpriced organizational tool that costs $40 and makes you feel like you have your life together even when you absolutely don't. I flipped it open, scanning through her color-coded schedule. Green for work meetings, blue for personal appointments, pink for, oh, would you look at that, book club in pink, every Thursday evening for the past 4 months. Sometimes Saturdays too. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of the pages, building my case like I was preparing for the trial of the century. But here's where it got interesting. I cross-referenced her book club schedule with her Instagram posts because if there's one thing Hannah couldn't resist, it was documenting every moment of her life for public consumption. And wouldn't you know it, on several of those Thursday book club nights, she'd posted photos from locations that were definitely not book clubs unless book clubs had started meeting at sports bars and movie theaters. One photo showed her with a craft beer and the caption, "Needed this after a long week," time-stamped at 8:30 on a Thursday. Another showed her at what looked like someone's backyard, a fire pit in the background, tagged with Dylan and 3 other people I vaguely recognized from his social circle. The pieces were coming together like the world's most depressing jigsaw puzzle. I moved on to the receipts, because apparently I'd decided to embrace every cliché of the suspicious spouse playbook. Hannah kept a folder of receipts for tax purposes. She was weirdly meticulous about that kind of thing, probably the only area of her life where she actually gave a damn about organization and honesty. I started going through them, month by month, and oh boy, did I hit the jackpot of incriminating evidence. Dinner for 2 at Marco's, that fancy Italian place downtown, $78 on a Wednesday night when I was working late. Hotel room at the Riverside Inn, $160 on a Saturday when she told me she was at a PR conference in Milwaukee. Multiple purchases at Victoria's Secret, which would have been exciting if I'd ever seen any of the lingerie she'd apparently been buying. I hadn't received a sexy surprise in probably 6 months, so either she was hoarding fancy underwear like a dragon with a very specific treasure preference, or someone else was getting the fashion show. My personal favorite was a receipt from a sporting goods store for a tent and camping supplies totaling $342. Hannah hated camping. Hated it. I tried to take her camping once during our 2nd year of marriage, and she'd lasted exactly 4 hours before demanding we pack up and find the nearest hotel, because nature is gross and bugs are a hate crime. But apparently, she'd overcome her deep-seated fear of the outdoors when Dylan suggested a camping trip to his family's lake property. How convenient. How absolutely, perfectly convenient. I sat on the floor of her office, surrounded by receipts and lies, and started laughing. Not a happy laugh, more like the unhinged cackle of someone who'd just discovered that his entire relationship was built on a foundation of bull, and his wife had the audacity to be bad at covering her tracks. She'd kept the receipts. She'd literally kept the paper trail of her affair in a neat little folder labeled 2024 expenses. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. Then I did something that I'm not particularly proud of, but also have zero regrets about. I checked our cat's Instagram account. Yes, our cats had Instagram. Hannah had started it a year ago as a fun project to build her content creation skills, which apparently meant posting photos of Mr. Whiskers and Colonel Fuzz with captions written from their perspective. It was as ridiculous as it sounds, but it had somehow gained 3,000 followers who genuinely enjoyed watching our cats do absolutely nothing interesting. I scrolled through the posts, and there it was, photographic evidence that even our pets were in on the betrayal. 2 posts from the past month showed the cats at Dylan's apartment. One caption read, "Mr. Whiskers visiting Uncle Dylan's bachelor pad. Hashtag catsoff Instagram, hashtag catlife, hashtag adventure time." Uncle Dylan. Uncle Dylan. Like he was part of the family. Like he hadn't been systematically destroying said family from the inside, like some kind of friendship termite. The location tags confirmed it. Dylan's address, which I knew because I'd helped him move into that apartment 2 years ago, carried his couch up 3 flights of stairs like a good friend, even bought him a housewarming gift basket from Trader Joe's with all the fancy cheeses he liked. I'd literally contributed to creating the love nest where my wife was apparently spending her Thursday evenings instead of reading books she had no intention of finishing. I took screenshots of everything. Every Instagram post, every receipt, every suspicious calendar entry. I created a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence and then changed it to Personal Documents because I was still thinking like someone who might need to show this to a lawyer eventually, and I wanted to at least pretend I had some dignity left. My phone buzzed. Another text from Hannah. "When are you getting home? We need to talk." I looked around at the explosion of evidence surrounding me. Receipts scattered across the floor, her planner open to another book club entry, my laptop screen showing a photo of MY Cats at MY Best Friend's apartment, and typed back, "Already home. Take your time. Let her think I was clueless for a little longer. Let her walk into this house believing she still had control of the narrative. that she could explain away the midnight phone call with some creative storytelling and maybe a few tears. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting here with enough evidence to write a true crime podcast about the death of my marriage. I heard keys in the front door. Hannah was home early, probably unable to concentrate at work because she was too busy panicking about damage control. I quickly closed her planner, stuffed the receipts back in the folder, and positioned myself on the couch with my laptop like I'd been sitting there the whole time. Just a normal guy doing normal things, definitely not conducting a full-scale investigation into his wife's extracurricular activities. The door opened. Hannah walked in looking nervous, her smile forced and brittle. "Hey," she said cautiously. "How was Chicago?" I looked up from my laptop and smiled back, channeling every ounce of fake normalcy I could muster. "Boring conference stuff. Same old, same old. How was your week?" She visibly relaxed, probably thinking she'd dodged a bullet. "Oh, busy with work. The usual. Book club last night." I asked innocently. She froze for just a second, barely noticeable if you weren't looking for it. "Yeah, it was good. We're reading this really interesting memoir." "Cool," I said. "What's it about?" Watch her squirm. Watch her try to remember which lie she'd told. It's, about a woman who travels across America finding herself. Very inspiring. Sounds great. I replied, turning back to my laptop. "You should tell me more about it sometime." I could feel her watching me, trying to figure out if I knew, if I suspected, if she needed to start preparing her defense. But I just kept my eyes on the screen, the picture of a trusting, oblivious husband. Game on, Hannah. Game absolutely on. The next few days were like living in a really bad stage production where everyone had forgotten their lines, but was committed to improvising through the awkwardness anyway. Hannah was trying way too hard to act normal, which ironically made everything feel completely abnormal. She was being overly affectionate in that performative way that people do when they're trying to convince themselves they're not terrible human beings. Lots of cheek kisses, random hugs from behind while I was making coffee, asking about my day with this exaggerated interest that she definitely hadn't shown in months. It was like watching someone try to speedrun relationship repair without actually addressing any of the problems. A bold strategy that was definitely not going to work out in her favor. Sunday morning, she waltzed into the kitchen wearing one of my old college t-shirts and those ridiculous fuzzy socks that made her shuffle around like a geriatric penguin, looking all cute and domestic, like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie about redemption and second chances. She'd made pancakes. Actually made them, not just reheated some frozen ones, which should have been my second clue that something was seriously wrong because Hannah's cooking abilities peaked at assembling a charcuterie board and calling it meal prep. "Missed you," she said brightly, leaning in to kiss my cheek while sliding a plate of slightly burned pancakes in front of me. The pancakes looked like they'd survived a natural disaster, but hey, points for effort, I guess. "Yeah," I replied, drowning the pancakes in enough syrup to mask whatever culinary crimes had been committed in their creation. "Me too. Especially the peace and quiet." It came out more honest than I'd intended, a little slip of the mask I'd been carefully maintaining. Hannah laughed, but it was that awkward, uncertain laugh people make when they're not sure if you're joking or insulting them. I didn't laugh back. I just cut into my pancake with surgical precision and watched her squirm, her smile faltering at the edges. "You seem different," she observed, sitting down across from me with her own plate and a cup of coffee that was probably more cream and sugar than actual coffee. Everything about her felt calculated now, like I was watching an actress play the role of concerned wife, without really understanding the character's motivation. "Different how?" I asked, meeting her eyes with the kind of blank expression I usually reserve for boring work meetings and conversations with my mother-in-law. "I don't know. Just different. Quiet, maybe." "I'm always quiet," I pointed out, which was true. I'd spent the last year of our marriage being quiet while she gallivanted around town with my best friend, so really, I was just being consistent with my established character traits. She studied me for a moment, probably trying to figure out if I was onto her, or if I was just being weird because of work stress or some other convenient excuse she could latch onto. I gave her nothing, just ate my terrible pancakes and scrolled through my phone like a regular Sunday morning, like my entire world hadn't been revealed as an elaborate scam. The rest of the day continued in this bizarre alternate reality where Hannah was trying to be the perfect wife, and I was playing the role of oblivious husband who definitely didn't have a folder on his laptop titled Evidence, with enough material to destroy her reputation faster than you can say home-wrecking hypocrite. She suggested we watch a movie together, something we hadn't done in months, and curled up next to me on the couch like old times. I could smell her perfume, that expensive stuff that definitely wasn't purchased with the intention of impressing me, and I had to resist the urge to get up and leave the room. Instead, I put my arm around her shoulders because I was committed to this performance, to letting her believe everything was fine while I quietly assembled my masterpiece of consequences behind the scenes. She relaxed into me, probably thinking she'd successfully swept the whole midnight phone call incident under the rug, that her vague "phone died" excuse had been sufficient to close that particular chapter of awkwardness. Dylan texted me that evening. "Hey man, you good? Haven't heard from you." The absolute audacity. The sheer nerve of this guy to send me a casual, "You good?" text like he hadn't answered my wife's phone at 1 in the morning, like he wasn't actively participating in the destruction of a decade-long friendship and my marriage. I stared at that text for a solid 5 minutes, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, 17 different responses fighting for dominance in my brain. I went with, "All good bro, been busy with work stuff." Short, normal, giving him absolutely nothing to work with. Let him wonder. Let him stress about whether I knew, whether Hannah had told me some sanitized version of events, whether their little secret was still safe. The psychological warfare was honestly more satisfying than any angry confrontation would have been. Hannah was unpacking her work bag in the bedroom, and I watched her from the doorway like I was observing a really interesting documentary about people who make terrible life choices. She pulled out her laptop, her planner, a half-empty water bottle, and what looked like a new scarf. Designer. Expensive, definitely not purchased by me. She folded it carefully and placed it in her drawer, humming some pop song under her breath. "That's pretty," I commented, nodding at the scarf. "New." She tensed for a microsecond. "Oh yeah? Got it on sale last week. Such a good deal." Lie. I could see the price tag still attached inside the fold. $128, no sale sticker in sight. She was lying about a scarf. A scarf. Like she was paying per syllable for her fabrications and wanted to maximize her investment in dishonesty. "Nice," I said. "Looks expensive even for a sale. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself, you know?" She smiled at me, and I smiled back. This was my life now, smiling through conversations where every word was potentially loaded with subtext, where I had to analyze whether she was talking about the scarf or justifying her entire affair with some retail therapy metaphor. Honestly, if I made it through this without developing trust issues that would require years of therapy, it would be a miracle. That night, after Hannah had fallen asleep, she always slept like the dead, one of those people who could sleep through a marching band practicing in the bedroom. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document. The blank page stared back at me, cursor blinking with anticipation, waiting for me to make my first move in what was about to become the most elaborate, petty, satisfying plan I'd ever constructed. This wasn't going to be revenge exactly. Revenge implied acting out of pure emotion, doing something rash and stupid that would make me look like the villain. No, this was going to be something much more sophisticated. This was going to be poetic accounting, a careful balancing of the scales where every action had an equal and opposite reaction, where consequences lined up like dominoes just waiting for someone to tip the first one. I titled the document Project Phoenix, because I'm dramatic and also because I like the idea of something new rising from the ashes of my burned marriage. Plus, it sounded way better than how I'm going to systematically dismantle my wife's affair while maintaining plausible deniability. I started making lists. Bullet points of information I had, resources I could access, connections I could leverage. Dylan worked in real estate, same general industry as me, but different company. We'd collaborated on a few deals, shared client referrals, even discussed partnering on an investment property once upon a time when I thought he was actually my friend and not a backstabbing opportunist with the moral compass of a corrupt politician. That's when it hit me. I had access, not to anything illegal or dramatic, just information. Public records, professional connections, industry knowledge that could be used in creative ways. Dylan had been bragging for months about this big lake cabin purchase he'd made, some investment property that he was planning to flip or rent out, or whatever real estate bros do with their toys. He'd show me the listing, asked my opinion on the property value, even joked about how we should all go up there for a weekend trip. Yeah, that weekend trip invitation had a whole different context now. I pulled up the county property records website, all public information, perfectly legal to access, and searched for Dylan's name. There it was, one lake cabin, purchased 6 months ago for $280,000. I started digging deeper, looking at the transaction details, the mortgage information, the property tax status. And wouldn't you know it, there were some interesting discrepancies in the paperwork. Nothing major, just little things that someone with a keen eye and a professional background in logistics and legal documentation might notice. Things that, if brought to the attention of the right people, could cause some uncomfortable questions to be asked. I wasn't going to do anything illegal. I wasn't going to forge documents or make false reports or engage in any behavior that would compromise my own integrity. But I was absolutely going to make sure that every single loose thread in Dylan's professional life got pulled, every corner that he'd cut got examined, every little mistake got magnified. If Hannah wanted excitement, if she wanted drama and passion and whatever else she thought she was getting from this affair, she was about to get a fireworks display of consequences that would make the 4th of July look like a sparkler. I saved the document, closed my laptop, and looked over at my sleeping wife. She looked peaceful, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. Part of me, a very small, rapidly shrinking part, felt bad about what I was planning. But then I remembered Dylan's voice answering her phone, her laugh in the background, the stack of receipts documenting months of lies, and that small part of me shut up real quick. Tomorrow I'd start making calls. Casual, friendly calls to mutual acquaintances. Just checking in, networking, maybe mentioning a few interesting observations about property transactions and professional ethics. Nothing direct, nothing traceable back to me. Just planting seeds and watching them grow. Game on, Hannah. Game absolutely on. Monday morning rolled around with all the enthusiasm of a DMV appointment, and I showed up to work with my game face on and a travel mug full of coffee that could probably power a small spacecraft. The office was its usual hive of mediocre productivity, people shuffling between cubicles, the printer jamming for the 3rd time that week, someone microwaving fish in the break room like a certified psychopath. Normal, boring, exactly what I needed while my personal life resembled a telenovela written by someone who hated happy endings. My office was nothing fancy, just a glorified box with a desk, a computer that took 5 minutes to boot up, and a window that overlooked the parking lot where I could watch people's will to live slowly drain away as they arrived for another day of corporate existence. I had photos on my desk, one of Hannah and me from our wedding, both of us smiling like we'd just won the lottery instead of signing up for what would eventually become a masterclass in betrayal. I turned that photo face down. Baby steps toward my new reality. Renee Martinez knocked on my doorframe around 10, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing that expression she always had, the one that said she knew something was up and was deciding whether to be concerned or amused. Renee was our firm's legal assistant, though calling her just an assistant was like calling a Swiss Army knife just a blade. She handled contracts, liaised with lawyers, knew more about real estate law than most of the agents, and had this uncanny ability to smell drama from 3 floors away. "You look like someone who's either planning a murder or a career change," she said, inviting herself in and putting one of the coffees on my desk. "And since you brought your lunch from home instead of buying the usual sad sandwich from the deli, I'm guessing it's the murder." I laughed despite myself. Renee had this way of cutting through bull with surgical precision, which was exactly why I needed her right now. "Is it that obvious? Eli, you've been staring at your computer screen for 20 minutes and you haven't actually typed anything. The screen's on the login page. So yeah, it's pretty obvious." She settled into the chair across from my desk, crossing her legs and looking at me with that mix of concern and curiosity that made her simultaneously the best person to confide in and the most dangerous person to lie to. I took a sip of the coffee she'd brought, vanilla latte, my favorite, which she remembered because Renee remembered everything. "Hypothetically," I started, because even in my spite-fueled state, I was still cautious enough to frame things carefully. If someone discovered that their spouse was, let's say, romantically involved with a mutual friend. "Oh, we're doing hypotheticals? Fun. I love hypotheticals." Renee leaned forward, clearly invested now. "Go on." And this mutual friend happened to work in a related industry, had made some potentially questionable business decisions, maybe cut a few corners on paperwork that could be scrutinized more carefully. I trailed off, watching her face shift from curious to understanding to something that looked suspiciously like pride. Are we talking about Dylan? She asked bluntly, because subtlety was not Renee's strong suit, and honestly, I appreciated that about her. How did you? Eli, I've seen the way he looks at Hannah at company events. Also, he has the subtlety of a car alarm at 3 in the morning. I've been waiting for you to figure it out for like 6 months. She sipped her coffee, completely unfazed by the bombshell she'd just dropped. So what are we doing? And please tell me it's something creative, because if you're just going to cry and eat ice cream, I'm going to be disappointed. 6 months. She'd known for 6 months and hadn't said anything. I didn't know whether to be grateful for her respect of my agency or annoyed that she'd let me walk around like an idiot. I'm not crying, I said definitively. I'm strategizing. That's my boy. Renee pulled out her phone, opening what looked like a notes app. Okay, what do we know? What are we working with here? I filled her in on everything. The midnight phone call from Chicago, the receipts, the Instagram posts, the lake cabin purchase that Dylan had been so proud of. Renee listened with the focus of a prosecutor building a case, occasionally making notes, asking clarifying questions, nodding at certain details like she was mentally cataloging ammunition. So here's my question, she said when I'd finished. What's the endgame? Are we looking for scorched earth, or are we thinking more strategic dismantling? What's the difference? Scorched earth is loud, messy, satisfying in the short term, but potentially damaging to you in the long run. Strategic dismantling is surgical. You take apart the pieces methodically, everything looks like natural consequences, and you come out looking like the innocent party who definitely didn't orchestrate anything. She raised an eyebrow. I'm guessing you're a strategic dismantling kind of guy? I am now. I pulled up the property records I'd found on Dylan's cabin. Look at this. The purchase date, the mortgage paperwork, the LLC he set up to hold the property. Renee leaned in, her eyes scanning the documents on my screen. After a minute, she let out a low whistle. Oh, Dylan, you sloppy idiot. This LLC registration is a mess. He's got it registered in Wisconsin, but the property's in Minnesota, which means he's probably screwing up his tax obligations in at least one state, possibly both. Is that illegal? It's not illegal to be stupid, but it is illegal to not pay the correct taxes. And if someone were to, say, anonymously report some discrepancies to the respective state revenue departments. She trailed off meaningfully, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That someone wouldn't be me, right? Because I'm just a concerned citizen who noticed some public record irregularities? Exactly. You're just a thorough professional who believes in proper legal compliance. Renee was typing notes into her phone now, her fingers flying across the screen. What else? What about his work situation? That's when I remembered the deal. We're both working on the Riverside Plaza development, different angles, but same client base. He's got that major investor lined up, the one he's been bragging about for weeks. The Peterson Group? Renee's eyes lit up. Oh, this is good. This is very good. Why? Because I happen to know that the Peterson Group is extremely particular about who they do business with. They have this whole ethics clause in their contracts, background checks, the works. They dropped a developer last year because he had some unpaid parking tickets, and they considered it a pattern of disregarding legal obligations. She was grinning now, and it was slightly terrifying how much she was enjoying this. If someone were to bring certain property irregularities to their attention, they might reconsider their investment. I finished. They might reconsider their entire relationship with anyone associated with those irregularities. Renee looked at me with something like respect. Eli Porter, you sneaky logistics nerd. I'm impressed. I haven't done anything yet. But you're going to. It wasn't a question. So what's my role in this hypothetical scenario? I hesitated, because getting Renee involved meant potentially dragging her into something that could get complicated. I can't ask you to. Oh, shut up. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Henna's been insufferable at the last 3 company functions, posting those obnoxious Instagram stories about building her empire, while her actual job is writing press releases about office furniture. And Dylan, she made a disgusted sound. He borrowed my stapler 6 months ago and never returned it. I take stapler theft very seriously. This is about a stapler. This is about justice. The stapler is just a bonus. Renee stood up. All business now. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to forward me everything you have on Dylan's property situation, just the public records, nothing we obtained through questionable means. I'm going to review it with my lawyer eyes and draft a very concerned, very professional letter to the appropriate state agencies about some potential reporting discrepancies I happen to notice while doing routine industry research. That's not going to trace back to me. Eli, I do compliance reviews for fun on weekends. This is literally in my job description, identifying potential legal issues in real estate transactions. If anything, I'm being a good corporate citizen. She headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and about the Peterson Group? I'll mention the property concerns to my contact there. Casually, in a thought-you-should-know kind of way, just looking out for their best interests. You have a contact at the Peterson Group? I have contacts everywhere. It's called networking, Eli. You should try it sometime. She winked. This is going to be fun. Painful for them, but fun for us. After Renee left, I sat at my desk feeling like I'd just recruited a co-conspirator who was way more qualified for this than I was. My phone buzzed, a text from Hannah asking if I wanted to grab dinner together tonight. Maybe that type place I liked. She was really trying to sell this everything is normal narrative, and part of me was curious how long she could maintain the charade. I texted back, sounds good. 7 p.m. Let her think she was winning. Let her believe that her half-assed attempts at being a decent wife were enough to paper over the crater-sized hole she'd blown in our marriage. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting across from her at dinner, making small talk about work and asking about her day, all while knowing that by Friday, Dylan's perfect little life was going to start developing some very interesting cracks. I pulled up my email and started composing a message to a few industry contacts. Nothing obvious, just friendly check-ins with people I hadn't talked to in a while. Hey, how's that development project going? Heard the Peterson Group is investing. They're so thorough with their due diligence, right? Casual. Natural. Absolutely not planting seeds that would grow into beautiful trees of consequences. By lunch, I'd sent 5 emails, forwarded the property documents to Renee, and even managed to do some actual work so my boss wouldn't wonder why I was suddenly so distracted. I felt calm, focused, like I'd finally found a productive outlet for the anger and betrayal that had been simmering since that phone call in Chicago. Renee stuck her head back in my office around 3. Just FYI, I found 3 more irregularities in Dylan's paperwork. Want to know what they are? Hit me. He listed himself as the sole member of the LLC, but there's a second name on the mortgage application. Some woman named Jessica Hartley. That's either fraud or he's got another secret investor he didn't disclose properly, which means more tax complications and… Wait, Jessica Hartley? That's his ex-girlfriend from college. Renee's smile was absolutely wicked. Oh, this just keeps getting better. Monday started off like any other boring workday for Dylan and Hannah, I assume. They probably woke up thinking they'd successfully dodged the bullet, that the midnight phone call incident had been smoothed over with Hannah's pathetic phone died excuse and my apparent willingness to pretend everything was fine. They probably felt pretty good about themselves, like they'd gotten away with the perfect crime, like they were so clever and I was just some oblivious husband too wrapped up in logistics management to notice his wife was living a double life. What they didn't know was that Monday was about to hit them like a freight train loaded with karma and driven by a very petty logistics manager who understood how systems worked and exactly where to apply pressure to make the whole thing collapse. I went to work like normal, grabbed my usual coffee, sat through a morning meeting about warehouse efficiency that could have been an email, and checked my phone periodically for updates. Renee had texted me at 8:30. Letter sent to Wisconsin Revenue Department. CC'd Minnesota. Used my official company letterhead so it looks extra legitimate. Followed by a devil emoji, which felt appropriate. By 10 o'clock, the first domino fell. My phone rang. Caller ID showed Trevor Morrison, one of Dylan's biggest clients and a guy I'd worked with on a couple of deals last year. We had a decent professional relationship, the kind where you're friendly at industry events and occasionally grab lunch to talk about market trends and complain about interest rates. Eli, hey man, quick question for you. Trevor said, his voice carrying that tone people use when they're trying to sound casual but are actually fishing for information. You still tight with Dylan Chun? I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my voice neutral. We've been friends for a while, yeah? Why, what's up? I'm hearing some weird stuff about a property deal he's got going. Something about tax discrepancies and maybe some fraud issues with his LLC setup. Trevor paused. Look, I've got a major investment lined up with him on that Riverside project. But if there's smoke here, I need to know before I hand over a check with a lot of zeros on it. Wow, that's crazy, I said, channeling my best concerned friend energy. I mean, Dylan's always been pretty solid as far as I know, but honestly, man, if you're hearing concerns about legal compliance, you might want to get your lawyer to take a closer look at everything before you commit. Better safe than sorry, right? It wasn't a lie. It wasn't even particularly damning. I was just being a concerned industry professional offering reasonable advice. The fact that my concerned advice was going to torpedo Dylan's biggest deal was just a happy coincidence. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Trevor said. I'm going to pump the brakes on this thing until I get some clarity. Thanks for being straight with me. Anytime, man. That's what networking's for. I hung up feeling a warm glow of satisfaction that was probably unhealthy, but felt absolutely fantastic. Renee appeared in my doorway approximately 30 seconds later, holding her phone up like she'd just won the lottery. Dylan's client just pulled out of the Riverside deal. I'm monitoring the industry gossip channels, and it's all over the real estate chat groups. People are asking questions. That was fast. That's what happens when you build your business on a foundation of sloppy paperwork and misplaced confidence. She was practically vibrating with excitement. But wait, there's more. Remember how I said I'd casually mentioned some concerns to my contact at the Peterson Group? Yeah, they're launching a full background check on Dylan. Standard procedure when red flags pop up, but it means they're going to find every single mistake he's ever made, every corner he's cut, every form he filled out wrong. Renee sat down, crossing her legs and looking entirely too pleased with herself. I'd estimate he's got about 72 hours before they pull their investment too. You're terrifyingly efficient at this. I know. It's one of my best qualities. She checked her phone again. Oh, and here's the fun part. Hannah's company is starting to ask questions too. That caught my attention. What kind of questions? Well, when I was doing my deep dive on Dylan's business dealings, I noticed he's been listed as a consultant on some marketing materials that Hannah's PR firm produced, which would be fine, except he's not officially on their payroll, and there's some language in there that suggests he had access to client strategy documents. Renee looked up at me with a grin that could only be described as diabolical. That's a conflict of interest violation at minimum, possibly a breach of confidentiality agreements. Someone might have sent an anonymous tip to their HR department about it. Someone, a concerned citizen who believes in corporate ethics and proper disclosure policies. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Anyway, I've got a meeting in 5 minutes, but I wanted to give you the update. This is going exactly according to plan, which is nice because usually everything I plan goes sideways. After she left, I tried to focus on actual work, but it was impossible. I kept checking my phone, waiting for the fallout. Around 1 o'clock, Dylan texted me. Dude, weird question, but have you heard anything about issues with my cabin property? Some client just bailed on me citing legal concerns, and I have no idea what he's talking about. I stared at that text for a full minute, savoring the panic I could practically feel radiating through the screen. He was confused. He was worried. He had no idea that the dominoes were already falling and there was nothing he could do to stop them. I typed back. That's weird, man. No idea. Maybe just client cold feet? People get nervous about big investments. Playing dumb was so much more satisfying than I'd expected. Every casual, unhelpful response was like twisting the knife just a little bit more, and the best part was that I wasn't even lying. I genuinely didn't know what specific concerns Trevor had mentioned to him. I just pointed Trevor in the right direction and let him draw his own conclusions. By 3 o'clock, the office rumor mill was churning at full capacity. I overheard 2 coworkers talking by the coffee machine about how Dylan Shun was having some kind of professional crisis, how multiple clients were backing out, how there were whispers about investigations and compliance issues. The story was taking on a life of its own, growing and mutating with each retelling, and I hadn't even had to do anything except plant the initial seeds and let human nature take care of the rest. Hannah texted me around 4. Can we talk tonight? Something came up at work. My heart rate kicked up a notch. Here it comes. The moment when her carefully constructed facade started developing cracks. Sure. Everything okay? I replied, Because I was a supportive husband who definitely didn't know that his wife's entire life was currently imploding in slow motion. Just some HR stuff. Probably nothing, but kind of stressful. Probably nothing. She was still trying to minimize it, still thinking she could control the narrative. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I got home before she did, which gave me time to feed the cats and pour myself a beer. I'd earned it. Mr. Whiskers rubbed against my legs, probably hoping for extra food, and I scratched behind his ears. Your mom's about to have a very bad day, I told him. He meowed in response, which I chose to interpret as approval. Henna came through the door at 6:30 looking like she'd been through a war. Her makeup was smudged, she'd definitely been crying, and her hair was falling out of its usually perfect style. She dropped her bag on the floor and just stood there in the entryway, staring at nothing. Hey, I said carefully, walking over with a glass of water. What happened? She took the water but didn't drink it. They're investigating Dylan. Someone leaked documents to HR claiming he had access to confidential client files through me. They're saying it's a conflict of interest, that I might have violated my employment agreement. Her voice cracked. I could lose my job, Eli. They put me on administrative leave pending the investigation. I made what I hoped was an appropriately shocked face. Wow, that's crazy. Who would do that? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Suspicion was creeping in around the edges of her panic. I don't know. It's all happening so fast. Dylan lost a major client today too. Some issue with his property investments. It's like everything's falling apart at once. That's awful, I said, managing to sound sympathetic. What are the odds, right? Everything hitting at the same time like that. Yeah, she said slowly, still watching me. What are the odds? We stood there in uncomfortable silence, her clearly trying to figure out if I was involved somehow, me carefully maintaining my expression of concerned innocence. The cats wandered between us, completely oblivious to the psychological warfare happening in their presence. You wouldn't. She started, then stopped. Wouldn't what? Nothing. Never mind. She rubbed her eyes, smearing her mascara even more. I need to shower. Can we order takeout? I can't deal with cooking. Sure. Thai food. She nodded and disappeared upstairs. I heard the bathroom door close, then the sound of the shower running. I pulled out my phone and texted Renee. Phase 1 complete. She's spiraling. The response came back immediately. Beautiful. Phase 2 launches tomorrow. The Peterson group meeting is at 9. I ordered the Thai food, extra spring rolls because spite made me hungry, and settled onto the couch. Dylan texted again. Why are you doing this, man? So he'd figured it out. Took him long enough. I contemplated my response, considering about 15 different sarcastic options before settling on something simple and devastating. Because therapy was expensive, his response came fast. You're destroying my career over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. He was calling it a misunderstanding. Like I'd accidentally overheard him ordering pizza instead of answering my wife's phone at 1 in the morning. The audacity was almost impressive. I didn't respond. Silence was louder than anything I could say. Hannah came downstairs 20 minutes later, looking slightly more human, but still defeated. We ate our Thai food in near silence, her pushing noodles around her plate, and occasionally sighing dramatically like she was the star of a tragedy instead of the person who'd written the script for this disaster. Do you think I'll be okay? She asked quietly. I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd been married to for 6 years, who I'd trusted completely, who'd thrown it all away for excitement and validation and whatever else Dylan had offered that I apparently hadn't. Honestly, I said, I have no idea, but I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're good at adapting. It wasn't comforting. It wasn't mean either. It was just true. And somehow that felt perfect. The next 2 weeks were like watching a slow-motion car crash, except I was the one who'd carefully loosened all the bolts and removed the brake fluid. And honestly, I had the best seat in the house. Hannah's administrative leave turned into a full-blown investigation that had her company's legal team crawling through every project she'd worked on for the past year. Dylan lost not just the Peterson Group investment, but 3 other clients who suddenly got very concerned about due diligence and ethical partnerships. It was beautiful, in that schadenfreude kind of way that probably made me a terrible person but felt absolutely justified given the circumstances. I'd started eating again, like actually eating, not just mechanically consuming food to stay alive. My appetite came roaring back with a vengeance, and I found myself cooking actual meals, trying new recipes, even enjoying the process of chopping vegetables and measuring spices. Henna barely ate anything, mostly just picked at whatever I made and stared into space like she was a character in one of those pretentious art films where nothing happens for 2 hours and everyone pretends it's deep. "You seem happy," she observed one evening, watching me season a chicken breast with the kind of focus usually reserved for defusing bombs. Her tone was accusatory, like my refusal to be miserable was somehow a personal attack. "I found this great recipe on YouTube," I replied cheerfully, completely dodging the implication. "It's got lemon and garlic and this herb mixture that's supposed to be amazing. You want some?" "I'm not hungry." "Suit yourself. More for me." I hummed while I cooked, and I could feel her glaring at the back of my head. The cats had picked up on the shift in household dynamics and had started following me around instead of her, which was its own special kind of poetic justice. Even Colonel Fuzz, who'd always been Hannah's favorite, now spent most of his time lounging in my office while I worked from home. Dylan's professional collapse accelerated faster than I'd anticipated. Renee kept me updated with regular texts that read like a soap opera recap. Peterson Group officially pulled out, issued a statement about incompatible business practices, one message said. Another, Wisconsin Revenue Department opened an official investigation into his LLC. This is better than Netflix. The real estate community was small and gossipy, and once word got out that Dylan Shun was under investigation for potential tax fraud and had lost multiple major clients, other people started backing away like he was radioactive. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who might drag them down too. It was the professional equivalent of being voted off the island, except the island was his entire career and the voting was unanimous. I ran into Marcus Donnelly at a coffee shop on Thursday morning. Marcus was another real estate developer who'd worked with Dylan on a few projects. He spotted me in line and made a beeline over, clearly looking for information. "Eli, man, what's the deal with Dylan?" Marcus asked, lowering his voice like we were discussing state secrets instead of the professional implosion of a mutual acquaintance. "I heard he's under investigation. Something about property fraud." I sipped my coffee slowly, taking my time to respond. "You know, Marcus, I'm not totally clear on all the details. Sounds like there were some issues with how he structured his property holdings. Tax stuff, maybe? I try to stay out of other people's business, you know. But you guys were best friends, right? He hasn't said anything to you." "We haven't been talking much lately," I said, which was the understatement of the century. "Different projects, busy schedules. You know how it is." Marcus nodded knowingly, reading between the lines I wasn't even drawing. "Yeah, I get it. Smart to distance yourself before any of that blowback hits you. I'm pulling out of our joint venture with him next week. Can't afford to have my name attached to that mess." "Probably a wise move," I agreed, and Marcus clapped me on the shoulder before leaving, probably to go spread the word that even Dylan's best friend was distancing himself. The rumor mill was working overtime, and I hadn't even had to contribute much beyond existing and having strategically timed coffee. Henna's breakdown reached critical mass on a Tuesday night. I was in the living room reading a book, actually reading, not just scrolling through my phone, when she came downstairs looking like she hadn't slept in days. Which she probably hadn't, based on all the tossing and turning I'd heard from the guest bedroom where she'd been sleeping for the past week. "They're going to fire me," she said flatly, standing in the doorway like a ghost of her former self. "HR called today. They're terminating my employment, effective immediately, for breach of confidentiality agreements. They're not even letting me work out a notice period." I looked up from my book, a thriller about a man who fakes his own death, which felt oddly appropriate. "That's rough. I'm sorry. Are you, though?" She walked into the room, and I could see her hands shaking. "Are you actually sorry, Eli? Because you don't seem sorry. You seem fine. Better than fine. You seem like you're having the time of your life, while everything I've worked for is falling apart. I don't know what you want me to say, Hannah." I closed my book, marking my place carefully. "You made your choices. These are the consequences. I didn't fire you. I didn't tell you to give confidential information to someone who wasn't authorized to have it. But you knew." Her voice was rising now, panic and anger mixing into something desperate. "You knew about Dylan and me, and instead of talking to me about it like an adult, you decided to destroy both of our lives." The accusation hung in the air between us. This was it. The moment where she'd finally admitted it out loud, where the pretense died and we could stop dancing around the elephant that had been living in our house for months. I destroyed your lives. I stood up, and I was calm, calmer than I'd been in weeks. Hannah, I found out my wife was cheating on me when my best friend answered her phone at 1 in the morning. You destroyed your own life. I just stopped participating in the cover-up. It wasn't. We didn't. She was crying now, mascara running down her face in black rivers. It just happened, Eli. We didn't plan it. You were always working, always distracted, and Dylan was just there, and he listened, and you decided that was a good enough reason to blow up our marriage? I felt my voice getting harder, colder. You want to blame me for working? For paying our mortgage and our bills, and trying to build a stable life? Fine. Blame me. But own your part in this, Hannah. You made a choice. Multiple choices. Every time you lied. Every time you snuck around. Every time you looked me in the face and pretended everything was fine. Those were choices. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. Part of me, a very small, rapidly disappearing part, wanted to comfort her. But the rest of me remembered every lie, every receipt, every late night she'd claimed was book club, and that small part got voted down by a landslide. Dylan lost his job, she said through her tears. They fired him today. Said his legal issues made him a liability. He's losing the cabin too. Can't make the mortgage payments without his income, and the investigation means no bank will work with him. Wow, I said, and I meant it. Renee hadn't even told me about Dylan losing his job yet. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate. Hannah looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Eli, his life is ruined. My life is ruined. We've lost everything because you couldn't forgive one mistake. One mistake. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. Hannah, you had an affair for months. Months. That's not one mistake. That's a series of deliberate decisions. And forgiveness? You want forgiveness? You never even apologized. You just expected me to pretend nothing happened while you continued living your double life. I'm apologizing now, she said desperately. I'm sorry, Eli. I'm so sorry. I made terrible choices and I hurt you, and I understand if you hate me. But please, please stop whatever you're doing. Call off the investigation. Tell whoever you told to back off. Dylan doesn't deserve this. I don't deserve this. I sat back down, but not next to her. I took my chair across the room, maintaining distance. I can't call off anything, Hannah. I didn't start any investigation. I didn't file any reports. All I did was make sure that the proper authorities had access to public information that revealed legitimate legal concerns. If Dylan and you are facing consequences, it's because you broke rules that existed long before I found out about the affair. It was technically true. I'd orchestrated things, sure, but I hadn't fabricated anything. Every problem they were facing stemmed from actual mistakes they'd actually made. I'd just helped those mistakes find their way into the light. You're not this person, Hannah said, shaking her head. The Eli I married wouldn't do this. He wouldn't be cruel. He wouldn't destroy people. The Eli you married was an idiot who thought his wife loved him and his best friend was actually his friend. I stood up, done with this conversation. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not that person anymore. Good. That person was exhausting to be. I walked toward the stairs, ready to go to bed and leave her crying on the couch. But I stopped at the doorway and turned back. For what it's worth, Hannah, I really did love you. I would have done anything for you. But you traded that for whatever you thought Dylan could give you. So here's my apology. I'm sorry you made such a catastrophically bad choice. I'm sorry you valued excitement over loyalty. And I'm especially sorry that you're just now realizing what you lost. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and slept better than I had in years. 2 weeks after Hannah's spectacular meltdown in our living room, life had taken on this surreal quality where everything felt both completely different and oddly normal at the same time. I'd moved her stuff into the guest bedroom. Not because she asked, but because I was tired of seeing her clothes in my closet and her skincare products cluttering the bathroom counter. She'd been staying at her sister's place most nights anyway, only coming back occasionally to grab more belongings and avoid eye contact with me like I was Medusa, and she was worried about turning to stone. I'd started going to the gym again, actually going instead of just paying for a membership I never used. Turns out, lifting heavy things and pretending they're your problems is surprisingly therapeutic. I'd lost about 10 pounds without even trying, Apparently, stress and betrayal are excellent for your metabolism, though I wouldn't recommend them as a sustainable weight loss strategy. My coworker Brad had even commented that I looked different in a good way, which I chose to interpret as a compliment rather than an observation that I'd previously looked like a sad potato. Work had become almost enjoyable. Without the constant background anxiety about my failing marriage, I could actually focus on projects, contribute ideas in meetings, even crack jokes with Renee, who'd become something like my partner in crime and unofficial therapist. She'd kept me updated on every development in the Dylan saga like she was narrating a documentary about the consequences of poor life choices. He's trying to sell the cabin at a loss, she told me over coffee on Friday. Can't find buyers because the property's caught up in the investigation. Also, his ex-girlfriend Jessica is suing him for fraud. Turns out he used her name on documents without her permission. That's a whole other legal nightmare. Jessica's suing him. I'd almost felt bad. Almost. That's rough. That's karma, Renee had corrected, stirring her latte with the tiny stick like she was mixing a potion. You reap what you sow, and Dylan apparently planted a field of terrible decisions and is now harvesting the world's worst crop. I'd gained my appetite back with a vengeance. Food tasted better, colors seemed brighter, and I'd started listening to music that wasn't sad jazz about lost love and regret. I'd downloaded some upbeat indie rock, some hip-hop with aggressive beats that made me feel like I was the protagonist in a movie about reinvention. Even the cats seemed happier, Mr. Whiskers had stopped knocking things off counters as frequently, and Colonel Fuzz had started bringing me his toy mouse as a peace offering or tribute or whatever cats do when they decide you're worthy of their attention. Sunday evening, I was making myself dinner. Nothing fancy, just some pasta with homemade sauce because I'd discovered that cooking was actually fun when you weren't doing it out of obligation when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Eli? It's Dylan. I stood there in my kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, tomato sauce simmering on the stove, and tried to process the absolute audacity of this man calling me like we were still friends who could just chat about the weather and sports scores. Dylan, I said neutrally, giving him absolutely nothing to work with. Look, man, I know things are complicated right now, but I need to talk to you. Can we meet up? Get a beer? Talk this through like adults? His voice had that desperate edge to it, like a salesman trying to close a deal he knows is already dead. I don't think that's a good idea, I replied, stirring my sauce with perhaps more aggression than was strictly necessary. 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. He was pleading now, and I realized with a strange sense of detachment that I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just nothing. He'd become irrelevant, a character from a previous chapter of my life that I'd already closed and shelved. There's nothing to explain, Dylan. You made your choices. I made mine. We're done here. I hung up before he could respond, blocked his number, and went back to my pasta. The sauce was perfect, rich, flavorful, exactly the right consistency. I plated it with some fresh Parmesan and basil, poured myself a glass of red wine that I'd been saving for a special occasion, and decided that celebrating my complete indifference to my ex-best friend's desperation counted as special enough. I was halfway through my meal, watching some crime documentary about art forgers, when there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps, urgent and insistent. The cat's ears perked up, Colonel Fuzz letting out a low growl that suggested even he knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant interaction. I looked through the peephole, and there she was, Hannah, standing on my doorstep at 8:30 on a Sunday night, looking like she'd been through several circles of hell and hadn't enjoyed any of them. Her hair was a mess, not the artfully tousled mess she usually cultivated for Instagram, but actual I haven't washed this in 3 days mess. She was wearing sweatpants and an old college hoodie, no makeup, eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked small, defeated, nothing like the confident PR professional who'd smiled at me over coffee just a month ago while secretly destroying our marriage. I debated not answering. I could just go back to my couch, finish my pasta, pretend I hadn't seen her. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe the need for closure, maybe just the desire to see this whole saga through to its conclusion, made me open the door. Hannah, I said, leaning against the doorframe and not inviting her in. I have nowhere else to go, she whispered, and her voice cracked on the last word. My sister kicked me out. Said she couldn't watch me self-destruct anymore. My parents won't return my calls. I have $600 in my bank account and no job prospects because everyone in the industry knows what happened. Dylan won't even talk to me anymore. He blames me for everything. Says I ruined his life by being careless with the documents. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, one hand on the door. Watching her fall apart on my doorstep like this was some kind of dramatic movie scene, except it was just sad and pathetic and real. Can I come in? Please? Just for tonight. I'll sleep on the couch. You won't even know I'm here. She stepped forward, reaching for my arm, and I stepped back, maintaining distance. No, I said simply. Eli, please. I'm begging you. I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve your help. But I'm desperate. I have nowhere to go. It's getting cold at night, and I've been sleeping in my car and you have nowhere to go. I repeated slowly, like I was testing the words in my mouth. You feel abandoned, alone, like everyone you trusted has turned their back on you. She nodded eagerly, hope flickering in her eyes like maybe I was finally understanding, finally ready to be the hero who saved her from the consequences of her own actions. Perfect, I said, and my voice was calm, almost gentle. Now you know exactly how it feels to be replaced. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. How can you be so cruel? This isn't you. The Eli I knew had compassion, had empathy. The Eli you knew was a doormat. I interrupted. He let people walk all over him because he thought being nice was the same as being good. He thought if he just worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, trusted completely enough, that would be sufficient. And you know what? That Eli died in a hotel room in Chicago when he realized his wife was cheating on him with his best friend. This Eli, I gestured to myself. This Eli has standards. I made a mistake. You made dozens of mistakes. Hundreds, probably, if we count every individual lie and betrayal. And now you want me to what? Feel sorry for you? Take you back? Pretend the last year of my life wasn't built on complete fiction. I shook my head. Hannah, you want forgiveness? That's above my pay grade. Try customer service. They're open 24/7. She was openly sobbing now, mascara-free tears streaming down her face. You've changed, she muttered, and it sounded like an accusation, like my refusal to be destroyed by her betrayal was somehow a character flaw. Turns out, when you're not spending all your emotional energy managing a failing marriage and pretending your best friend isn't stabbing you in the back, you have time to pursue things that actually matter. Renee had come on board as my business partner and official voice of reason, mostly because she was tired of reviewing contracts for other people's mediocre ideas when she could be reviewing contracts for our genuinely cool projects. We'd converted an old warehouse in the South District into a community center with art spaces, a computer lab, and a small cafe that served decent coffee and employed local teenagers who needed job experience. It felt good, like actually, genuinely good, to build something that helped people instead of just moving boxes from point A to point B. I'd started traveling on weekends, nothing crazy, just road trips to small towns with interesting architecture and good hiking trails. Turns out America is full of beautiful places when you're not too depressed to notice them. I'd hiked part of the Appalachian Trail, visited some national parks, even took a solo trip to New Orleans where I ate my weight in beignets and listened to jazz that was significantly better than my Spotify playlist had ever been. The best part? I'd adopted another cat. Justice was a 3-year-old black cat with one white paw and the attitude of a mob boss who'd seen some things. The shelter volunteer had warned me he was selective with his affection, which was code for, this cat will judge you constantly and maybe love you if you're worthy. Perfect. He fit right in with Mr. Whiskers and Colonel Fuzz, and together they formed a furry tribunal that supervised my every move and occasionally knocked things off counters just to keep me humble. One Tuesday afternoon, I was grabbing coffee at this place downtown, one of those independent shops that actually roasted their own beans and didn't spell your name wrong on purpose for social media engagement. I was waiting for my order, scrolling through project proposals on my phone, when I saw her. Hannah was sitting alone at a corner table, staring into a half-empty cup of coffee like it held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. She looked tired, not just physically tired, but that bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying regret around like a backpack full of bricks. She'd lost weight. Her clothes hung a little looser, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the styled perfection she used to maintain. She looked like a different person, or maybe just like the person she'd been hiding under all the Instagram filters and PR polish. She looked up, saw me, and I watched about 17 different emotions flash across her face in the span of 2 seconds. Surprise, hope, fear, resignation. She stood up slowly, hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if approaching me would result in conversation or a restraining order. "Do you hate me?" she asked quietly when she reached me. I thought about it, really thought about it, searching for anger or bitterness or any of the negative emotions I'd carried around for months after Chicago. But they weren't there anymore. They'd been replaced by something better, indifference mixed with genuine contentment about my own life. I shook my head. Nah, hate requires effort. She looked like she wanted to say more, maybe apologize again, or ask about my life, or try to explain herself one more time. But I didn't wait around for it. The barista called my name. I grabbed my coffee, tipped generously because good coffee deserves recognition, and headed for the door. "Eli," she called after me, and I paused but didn't turn around. "I'm glad you're doing well." "Thanks," I said over my shoulder, and I meant it. Not because I cared about her approval, but because it was true. I was doing well, better than well, and her opinion on the matter was about as relevant as a weather forecast from last year. Outside, it started to rain, that soft, steady spring rain that washes everything clean without being dramatic about it. I didn't have an umbrella, didn't really care. I just walked to my car whistling some tune I'd heard on the radio, letting the rain hit my face and thinking about how different this moment was from that night in Chicago when my world had fallen apart in a generic hotel room. Some storms don't come to break you, I thought, unlocking my car and tossing my coffee in the cup holder. They come to rinse the stupidity off. I drove home to my cats, my business plans, my life that I'd built from the wreckage of betrayal and bad decisions that weren't even mine. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, genuinely, impossibly free.